At this time, we have a most wonderful service lined up for you. I told you before. We will now have the Sermonette by our dear brother, Rob Giovi.
Happy Sabbath, all. How are we doing? Sabbath to those online. Just gonna set my timer here. I don't want to go over. I think 45 minutes should do it. All right. So, all right. What I'm going to talk about today is something that has always played a really big thought process in my life, and I'm just going to get right into it. Let's turn to Luke 14. Luke 14. So Luke 14, and we're going to start in verse 15. And the context of this parable, before we jump right into it, I want to give a little bit of context here. The context of this parable is that Jesus is sitting in a house of a Pharisee. And he's there at the home, breaking bread, eating. And as usual, at this time period, Christ is admonishing the Pharisees, right? And in turn, sort of the apostate Jews who are focusing on the letter of the law at this time. We know that Christ had a lot of issues with the religious leaders at the time, focusing on the law rather than the spiritual intent of what was going on. And this also connected to their hearts. Their hearts weren't in the right place. And yes, he's speaking to the Pharisees and the lawyers that are in this home, but it also extends to the Jewish community at large in this parable here. And as we know, because they reject the Messiah, that's one of the main reasons why there was this, really disconnect. So knowing all of that, let's look at this parable here of Luke 14, starting in verse 15 through 24. So it says here, now when one of those who sat at the table with him heard these things, he said to him, blessed is he who shall eat bread in the kingdom of God, right? So one of the men sitting at the table says, right, we're going to be eating and blesses those who eat the kingdom of God. And watch what Christ says here. Watch how he replies. Then he said to him, Christ, a certain man gave a supper and invited many, and sent his servant at supper time to say to those who invited, come, for all things are now ready. Christ right here is referencing, as we're going to say, Isaiah 25:6, where indeed God does say that there will be a big feast in the house, right, in the kingdom. There is going to be this big feast, and blessed is he who eats it. So that he's referencing 25, but let's get back to verse 18. But they all with one accord began to make excuses when they were invited. The first said to him, I have bought a piece of ground, and I must go see it. I ask that you have me excused. And another said, I have bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm going to test them. I ask you to have me excused. Still another said, I have married a wife, and therefore I cannot come. Have me excused. So that servant came and reported all these things to the master, who said to go invite them. And the master of the house became angry. This is serious. This is very serious here. So we could see in this analogy that God the Father is the master. The servant who's going out and inviting everyone is the Messiah, is Jesus. And Christ sees here that all that talk that the Pharisees and the community of these Jews here at the time, and all the talk they're doing about religious belief is just that. It's talk at this moment. Their hearts and their priorities are not with God in this area. They're prioritizing things of the life of this world. That's, the land. My wife, I just got married. I can't come. I can't do these things. They're putting all the material things of this world first, right? And they're consumed with this material life. So watch what he says here. So the master became angry and said to the servant, back in verse 21, go out quickly into the streets, the lanes of the city, and bring in here the poor, the maimed, and the lame and the blind, right? Again, fulfilling Isaiah when Christ said, when he was saying that this is who he will call. Again, fulfilling the prophecies in Isaiah. And the servant said, Master, it is done as you commanded, and there is still room. Then the master said to the servant, go out into the highways and the hedges outside of the community. So outside of the community to where they are, who would that be symbolically, do you think, outside of the Jewish community? The Gentiles, outside the community. He's saying, go out and get them, bring them in, and compel them to come in my house they may be filled, right? And that word compel in the Greek is angakusu, which means to force, to drive, to pull. And we say here that my house may be filled, for I say to you that none of those men who were invited shall taste my supper, those that he invited there. So this parable is about God who is calling, and he's giving an invitation, right? And the last time I spoke about God the Father, I spoke about God's nature. I spoke about the emotions that God has and God and his son who they have. And we see here Christ not only being a little bit angry, but this is also a little bit jarring and harsh. Imagine being in this room with a Pharisee who was the religious leader of the time. And what is he telling them? That you're not going to be there to eat of this feast in the kingdom if you continue on this way. Like this is, something that we have to really focus on where it comes to what is being spoken of and how we react to it. And we're going to see here that reaction to what is happening with this calling. So this parable struck a chord with me because I feel that sometimes as a part of the covenant community, I think we become sort of cavalier with what God has entrusted to us and just how special this calling or this invitation is to us. Turn with me to Matthew 13, verses 10 through 11. Matthew 13, verses 10 through 11. And the disciples came and said to him, "Why do you speak to them in parables?" And he answered and said to them, "Because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven." And what are these mysteries that we speak of? What are these mysteries that Christ is talking about here? In Romans, they mention a couple of these mysteries, and there are quite a few. I'm only going to just touch on a couple of them that relate to the Sermonette. But Romans 16:25, you don't have to turn there, talks about understanding that Jesus is the Messiah. That is a mystery of God that is revealed to us. That's something to focus on. And in Romans 11:25, another mystery is that the blindness of Israel, that Israel must be blinded in order for the Gentiles to come into fulfillment. That is another mystery that a lot of Israel and apostate Judaism and apostate Jews don't understand. So we must understand that that's some of the mysteries, and we're going to see it's going to connect here. So the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. It has been given to you as a major concept that we're seeing throughout the scriptures. The truth is not something that can be discovered. A lot of people say I'm gonna find God, and I'm going to search the scriptures and find God. But there is a little bit of a disconnect there. There's something that is stopping that from happening. And in reference to that first mystery I just spoke of, where understanding the Messiah, in Matthew 16, and a couple chapters later, again, one verse, you don't have to turn there. Jesus answered and said unto him, "Blessed art thou, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood hath not revealed it unto thee, but my Father which is in heaven." Right? What was revealed unto Simon? That Jesus Christ was the Messiah. This wasn't revealed through human interaction. It was revealed directly through divine intervention from the Father, from our Father. That is what's taking place here. It was something that God took the initiative to do, even as he has given the same to us, everyone in this room. He did not have to, he was not forced to, but out of his mercy and desire to see us share that life with the kingdom, he has been inviting us. He's given us this ability to comprehend these mysteries. So how does God give us this knowledge to us and make us aware of these mysteries? How does he do these things? By inviting us, as we know, or we all call it, being called. So turn with me to John 6, verse 44. John 6, verse 44. So keep in mind that invitation parable about the idea about Christ and the Father giving this out here. So John 6, 44, verse 45. And it says, "No one can come to me," to Christ, "unless the Father who sent me draws him. And I will raise him up at the last day," right? Speaking of the last great day and those resurrections that will take place. Verse 45, "For it is written in the prophets, and they shall all be taught by God, those whom he is drawing. Therefore, everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes to me." Right? Christ, again, is fulfilling here prophecy read in Psalms about how the good and upright in the Lord, he shall teach the sinners, right? God will teach the sinners, and the meek he will guide, and the meek he will teach. That's part of the Father's process. And how is he going to teach us these things? By drawing us in, by literally drawing us. That word draws in Greek is helkuo. And it's an interesting word that's used there. The Greek language is very complex, and it's used this word for a specific reason. This word that it says here is not merely a beckoning. It's not merely just saying, oh, I want your attention. It's not that. It's a powerful pull. And when that word is used in other scriptures, it's described where a fisherman is drawing a fish full of a net full of fish. And seen fish, we've all seen Finding Nemo. What happens when they go in that net? They fight it, right? And the net literally is pulling, it's drawing. It's an actual form. In its other use, Paul and Silas are dragged to the forum, again, against their will. Paul is dragged out of a temple, another term where it's used. The rich are dragged before the judgment seat. It's something that is forcefully done. And notice this conversation right before where Christ is saying, those who come to me, in verse 27, that same chapter, 27 through 30, John 6, 27 through 30, this is what reference up to this. Do not labor for the food which perishes, Christ says. Don't focus on the material. Don't focus on this world. But the food which endures for everlasting life, which is our Christ, which the Son of Man will give you. Then they said to him, what shall we do that we may do these works of God that you're talking about? Jesus answered and said to them, this is the work of God. This is the work that God is doing. That you believe in him whom he sent. This is the work God is doing. Making sure that we believe in the Messiah. A lot of us take advantage of this idea that we grow up in a world where Jesus Christ is the Son of God. We know that. But there is a different form of faith and belief that we have that the world doesn't have. There's something different that we have. Christ clearly is saying here that that's God's work, clarifying in verse 44, that originator, that source of this belief comes from the Father. Notice what he says here. And the Jews, he's talking to the Jews, but do they understand that? No, even to this day. I speak to a lot of Jewish students and rabbis today. How could God have a son? Is the big question they always give me. How could God have a son? It's not possible. It's that extra faith that we've been delivered to. God has this system setting up to call and convert and educate people for himself. He's doing it for a purpose. And we are a minority, very few in number, those who are truly called. And it's not the mighty, it's not the noble of this world, it's the weak, it says, of the world. We are the weak. God calls us and gives us a spirit and teaches us to help us understand. And of all the people of the earth, only we have the chance to understand the mysteries of God. Do we ever fully understand this? We are understanding the mysteries of the creator of the universe. This should be mind-boggling to us at times. It's a very small group, and that theme is throughout the scriptures of small entities being used. Even when he called Israel, what did it say in Deuteronomy 7, verse 7? I'll just read there. The Lord did not set his love on you or choose you because you were more in number than any other peoples, for you were the least of the peoples of Israel. That Israel was such a small fraction of it. They were nothing. And he turned them into what? Something that is still around here to this day, that is hated by the world. Why? Because they represent our Father. Even though they're not understanding fully the mysteries, that is what they're representing. Turn with me to John 17. This is about that special calling. This special calling here. 17 verse 20. For I do not pray for these alone, Christ is praying about for the people, his own disciples at this time, but also for those who will believe in me through their word. What word? The scrolls, the gospels. That is us. He's praying literally for us, those who will come after us. And Christ is praying for those to be called. And as believers, we have been personally called by our Father, which is a great honor. However, are we aware that God loves no one else in the universe as much as us? How can I say that? How can I claim something like that? Look what it says right here in verse 23 of that same chapter. It says right here, he asked God to reveal the world that you have sent me and have loved them as you have loved me. Just like when he chose Israel, he set his love upon them through the calling. Understanding this word here, as, that word as, that means to the same extent, to the same degree, equally, as much as his son. He loves us as much as his son. It means we could truthfully say there is not a being in the universe, whom God loves more than each one of us individually. Each one of you, God loves you. And this loves us so much, and he gives us something else that we desperately need through his calling, because he loves us. And Jude 1, verse 3, it says, Beloved, while I was very diligent to write to you concerning our common salvation, I found it necessary to write to you exhorting you to contend earnestly for the faith which was once and for all delivered to the saints. And again, this word faith is parissimo, and it literally means to cast upon, to entrust, to transmit, to translate. We all heard, how Wi-Fi and how the radio works. It shot through us. That is how this is literally working. It's divine intervention. Talk about miracles. This is literally a miracle happening. People say there's nothing happening like the times of Moses and the times of all the prophets. This is a miracle. The fact that we believe like this is a miracle. Faith is given to us as part of this calling. We cannot attain it without direct supernatural intervention. And why? Why did he do this? And John 4, verse 19, he says, we love God. Why? Because he first loved us. That's where it comes from. This is one-sided a little bit. He's doing the calling. He loves us and he's doing these things. That is the God that we worship. And it's humbling, brethren, the thought that the gift of calling, he gives the ability to know him and his son. Finally, let's turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 2, 10 through 12. And through this calling, this is what we get. This is part of the blessing we get. 1 Corinthians 2, 10 through 12. But God has revealed them to us, the called, through his Spirit. For the Spirit searches all things, yes, the deep things of God, those mysteries we just slightly touched upon, right? His counsel, his plans, his nature. For what man knows the things of man except the spirit of man? We know men. We know how men are. Our spirit, it's greedy, right? It's worldly. We know those things because we're men, because it's in us. Even so, no one knows the things of God except the Spirit of God. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, that free gift, again, that one-sided love, that we might know the things that have been freely given to us. That it's baffling how God is just so merciful and loving that he continues to outreach to us. This is what that invitation comes with, brethren, that we spoke about, that feast. This holy special calling comes with direct access to our Father. And he did it because he loved us first. Let us not be like the men of that parable that didn't prioritize God first and focus on worldly lust. We can't be like them. If you're being called now, answer it. Answer the invitation. And for those of us who have accepted that invitation, we must stay steadfast daily and through our actions show that we are proclaiming that we humbly accepted that invitation to that feast. May God bless you all, brother.
Thank you, Brother Rob. How was that for a sermonette?
Very good.
Indeed, very informative. I learned some new words. What was that first word you used? The P one? Plymouth? You used a P word. A Greek word, sorry. I found that very interesting. Starts with a P. So many Greek words. Someone said it sounded Greek to them. It was the one with the pull, like the fishes were pulled. The fish was pulling away, but you're pulling. That word is that's gonna be added to my dictionary. Oh, elquo. All right, I'll practice it. But at this time, without further ado, I told you we have a most wonderful service lined up for you. We will now have a special item, and it's gonna come to us from no other than the CGINY choir. CGINY choir.
Happy Sabbath, everyone.
Happy Sabbath.
Bless the Lord, oh my soul. Oh, my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh, my soul, I will worship His holy name. The sun comes up, it's a new day dawning. It's time to sing your song again. Whatever may pass and whatever lies before me, let me be singing when the evening comes. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh my soul, I will worship His holy name. You're rich in love and your soul to anger. Your name is great and your heart is kind. For all your goodness I will keep on singing. 10,000 reasons for my heart to find. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh my soul, I will worship His holy name. And on that day when my strength is failing, the end draws near and my time has come, still my soul will sing your praise unending. 10,000 years and forevermore. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh my soul, I will worship His holy name. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship His holy name. Sing like never before. Oh my soul, I will worship His holy name. I will worship His holy name. I will worship His holy name.
Thank you, CGINY Choir. That was indeed beautiful. I think we have an opening on the team, though. I think we need a choir director. That's all we're missing. I saw our dear brother right around there doing his hands like this. So, Richard, I think you actually volunteered yourself for that position. But anyway, thank you. Indeed, that was beautiful. Bless the Lord, oh my soul. At this time, we'll now have the announcements and also the introduction of our main speaker for today, Elder Roper.
Good afternoon, everyone. All right, so I'm doing announcements, but the introduction, I think Teron could do that better. So I'll sit that one out. Teron, you can rock the introduction. Yeah. Teron is a little more poetic, and every time I do an introduction, and a lot of the comparisons I make is always like with snacks. So if I did do an introduction, it would, parlay with like when pizza's delivered to a class, somebody special has come. You remember that when they were delivered a pizza in the classroom, we get all excited? Or maybe you have chocolate and you're gonna have a sales drive. When that chocolate is delivered, it's a big deal. I don't think Mr. Watts would appreciate that. So Teron, if you can handle that for me, I appreciate you. All right, guys. So today for announcements, what do I have? There's do you call it a planting? I guess it's a planting in New York City with the congregation that we have there. Now, unbeknownst to some of you, there are people that are not connected to us that are coming there. And when I bring it up, I sometimes I'm asking for help so that it kind of fills the room a little bit, makes it more comfortable for people that are coming by. And so that's what I was looking for at times. And we're still going to try to work with that and see where that goes. The weather today was an issue, but nevertheless, there seems to be a response. So if you ever wake up one morning and you're like, man, I got a lot of energy. I don't think the day's course of events is going to do it for me. I need something else to do. Then you could start off your day a little earlier and come on down there and help out, right? Okay. Second point with announcements. We have Passover and the days of unleavened bread coming up. The first day and the seventh day. We've had a thing going on where it's pointed out, is there really a last day of unleavened bread? A last day of sin? I don't know, that kind of stuck. So it's the first and the seventh day. Needless to say, we probably won't be meeting in this room. And so the option would be downstairs. Sometimes people had qualms with the room. But now's you don't care for the room? Feels like a dungeon. All right, so we got a description of a dungeon. And the engineer said it's a nice room. Yeah. So you ever look forward to seeing a movie and one person is like, the movie was horrible. And the other person was like, hey, it was pretty good. Usually it's somewhere in the middle. So if you can look at the middle between a dungeon and a nice room. My point is now's the time to discuss that, figure out what we want to do, instead of waiting till the last minute to discuss that. And then by way of snacks as well. Usually on the high days, we'll have food. We could figure that out too as we approach it. Those weeks go pretty quick. How we're going to do that, how we're going to organize it, what we would care to eat for those days. Everybody with me on that? All right. Then moving from that, Feast of Tabernacles, we have some preliminary things established already, and we're going to have a short meeting after service. We could discuss some things about the feast and just encourage people to be committed to whatever we're going to plan and be able to follow through with those plans. All right, so what have we learned so far? In a review, I am not qualified to give the introduction. The second thing that we spoke of, a lot of my analogies pertain to snacks. And I don't think that's a bad thing, and I won't deny it. Thirdly, what was the third one? What? The room, yes, the room downstairs. Let's keep that in mind, so please bring it up later. I'm not just doing this for kicks. I really want people to bring it up later. And 4, I don't remember. Yes, thank you. Mr. Watson is not usually here for this type of discussion. This is how we do. And sometimes assistance is needed. And so we got the feast, we're gonna have that taken care of. Now, another issue. We've had some fluctuations in the body of our congregation. And in the past, we've had people leave, and it creates a gap. And when they do leave, I don't know what's going on. Georgia's been taking some of our members. It's happened more than once. You often see people leave New York and go to Georgia. You don't really see people leave Georgia and come to New York. So I don't know how personally you guys want to take this with the Georgia congregation. I'm up for a little rivalry. Does everybody know who Jeff Reed is? Oh, you do? All right, so we can shout that brother out. He's taking a lot of our members. But, so I don't, out of your privacy, I don't know if you want this proclaimed yet. All right, I got the go ahead. So, let's see, the Vernon family. The Vernon family, led by Mr. Tehran and his wife, Celia, they were going to be leaving our company soon, and they'll be going down to Georgia. I don't know if everyone knew that we'll create a gap or a space in our group, and we're going to have have openings. We're going to have to hire some more people. I'll have you know, Celia is one of the founding members of the congregation. So back in the day, when we didn't have a lot of people, and maybe things may not have been as entertaining, but we made it entertaining on our own. I was witness to this. I was. And it was just a core group of people. So shout out to those core group. That core group is Mr. Anderson, Mark, John, and Celia. And that was the group. And so it's grown a bit. So from what I understand, I think their last week is next week. All right. So we're gonna celebrate them this week and next week. And again, let's not forget the Georgia congregation, what appears to be a shot across our bow. And we will address that going forward. That being said, I believe that's all the announcements. And as I already mentioned, I recuse myself. And so I sit as Mr. Vernon come up and introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Elder Roper. I mean, we went to sleep last night and everything seemed spick and span, right? Going home, my wife and I, she was like, why does everyone have their windshield wiper blades up? Not knowing that there would have been snow falling this morning. It would be snowing this morning, right? So we woke up and we saw all this stuff on the ground. And it's just the same. When you go to sleep, you don't know what you will be entertained with the following day. So here today in Queens, New York, we have straight out of Medina, Ohio. Okay, let me stop. We will know, yeah, right? This Sabbath, we're gonna have, well, we already have the Sermonette, which was beautiful indeed. Now we're gonna have the sermon by our dear pastor and friend, our dear brother Bill Watson.
Good afternoon, brethren. Good to be here again with all of you once more. Whoops. Somebody throw that? I haven't even started yet. Actually, I'm pretty easy to introduce. I'm just a mixed bag, George, so you can be relaxed about that. But it is really good, again, as I said, to be with you once more. And appreciate the opportunity. Once again, I bring you greetings from Medina. It's Medina, not Medina. Medina, Ohio, where I'm from. Medina, as well as the greetings from the home office in addition. They had snow over there in Ohio. That's where I'm based out of, Medina. That's where it is in Ohio. And they had snow, my wife was mentioning this morning to me, more so than what we have here from what she had expressed to me, but that's not unlike Ohio, where Medina is located up on the north side by Lake Erie, and does get that lake effect coming out of Canada. They call it the Alberta Clippers, and we really do get dumped on, much like Erie, PA, and Buffalo, New York, and we all know about Buffalo. We saw that stadium there and all, and that was quite something else. Had a little interesting experience. Those of you on the internet, also welcome. I wanted to extend that invitation as well. But I had a little interesting event. I walked into the hotel last night, and I mentioned I was checking in. My name was Bill Watson, and he said, ID, please. I said, I didn't have an ID. He says, no, I'm from Mexico. And he looked at me like, oh, yeah. I said, obviously, I'm only just kidding. I said, but what would you have done? What would you have done? He said, I'd have called my manager. But we all know that we are in some strange times, are we not? I mean, you know, talking about Georgia, I'll tell you what, they got a DA down there that really does need to be sit down. I mean, she needs to go bye-bye with what she has been doing with the people's money, along with this fella that she hired so that she could obviously personally gain from it, because it is certainly based on some of the things that if you've been witnessing, that trial is just ridiculous. It's like a couple of high school kids trying to cover their tracks. But that's another story. My point is, though, in this case, I think it illustrates the time, the day and age that we're living in. It is really surreal. I mean, some of the things that people are trying to get away with, and people that are in very high positions, people that are well educated from Yale and Oxford, Harvard, I mean, you name it, they are amazingly educated and yet somehow act so ignorant in some ways and attempt to try to get away with things that are just not really what you could say in some cases, and I'll just say it, legal. I mean, frankly, they seem to be coming from an entitlement background where they feel as though things are owed to them when in fact they're not. I mean, nothing's free in this world. I think all of us understand that. But the society that we're in today is quite different, brethren. And I want to, right out of the box here, I'm going to take a little bit of a advice from Robert there and get right to my point. And that is, I'd like to talk to all of you today about what is strong meat. I want to put a definition to that. What is strong meat? And I say that because it's going to become very important for all of us to recognize what just strong meat really is. There's a lot of opinions about what strong meat is when you put it into the religious category and try to define exactly what it is. And I want to cover some of that today because the society that we're living in is quite different. I think all of you will agree. I mean, there are things that we can no longer say today without getting in trouble. I mean, the political correctness and wokeness that we are all under and contending with in our social system is sometimes just ad nauseum. I mean, I don't know about you, but back when years ago, not even, thinking about 10 years ago just, it wasn't as bad as it is today. I mean, even comedy is different. Even comedy. I mean, I referenced, Saturday Night Live with the, the introduction there. I remember Eddie Murphy, and Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd. Funny things, skits that they would come up with. I mean, you'd be cracking up, or in living color, with Jamie Foxx and Jim Carrey, I think it was, or All in the Family. How about that? And Archie Bunker. Remember? I mean, there are some things you cannot say anymore because guess what? It seems like nobody's got any sense of humor anymore. Can't laugh at each other anymore. Can't have fun because, there's sensitivities now that we all have to be aware of because everything is taken offensively. Even the Cleveland Indians no longer can be called the Cleveland Indians. They got to be called, I think, the Cleveland Guardians or something along those lines. Right. The Washington Redskins. I mean, actually, going back to the Cleveland Indians, Chief Wahoo was a compliment. That was a compliment of public relations back when that logo was founded. That was not intended at all to be an insult. And frankly, you know who were complaining? Not the Indians. No. That's the crazy stuff about these things in respect to some of the laws and action and activity and attention that some of these issues get, because you wonder, well, where are they coming from? You know where they're coming from? Private interest groups. They're coming from a lot of private interest groups that have private intentions, that gain money for certain things, in doing certain ways of trying to acquire in their foundations that are nonprofit, so that they can continue to accumulate dollars and revenues for whatever their activities may be. And it's sad. It's very unfortunate, because the social etiquettes today have changed. In the work environment, I think many of you are already recognizing that it's different as well. You walk into a meeting and you say, okay, are there any people here, because the way the introductions go now is, are there any people here that are going by different pronouns? Yes, sir. I think it would be good if you just address me as they. See, I'm non-binary. What does that mean? Some people would say, you know, what does that mean? Okay, Mr. They, can you stand up and give us what you wanted to talk about? I mean, it doesn't even make sense. It's almost like we've gone insane to a certain degree, because it seems as though people, the sensitivities that have grown, are over the top in some regards. They're almost overly hyperbolous, overly exaggerated in some cases, because I think in some regards people are not that sensitive. But we're told to be that sensitive by a lot of what is going on in terms of how they spotlight these attention-getting issues. And it's sad. It's sad and it's unfortunate, because frankly, brethren, and I'm here to talk about this today because I think this is why it's very important that we understand what strong meat is. It has creeped in to the church. It has creeped in to the church. And sadly and unfortunately, it has affected it, that is the church at large, even in your Sunday keeping groups. It has affected congregations to certain degrees, whereby there have been divisiveness emerge in and amongst congregations, and of course in our community as well, the Church of God. And so these tensions about social issues, sensitivities about how you should treat your health care needs, sensitivities about geopolitical positions. Everybody's got an opinion about geopolitics. Everybody got an opinion about how to handle your health. Everybody's got an opinion about the social issues that we're all addressing. And consequently, everybody, in their opinion, is right. Nobody's wrong in this respect. And as a result, what do? You get arguments. You get face-offs, you get contentions, you get people that are exercised in some regards that are, frankly, sometimes it defaults into rudeness. And sadly, broken relationships. People that were friends, people that trusted one another, all of a sudden are no longer trusting each other. They're separating. They leave and part. Not that they're going to Georgia for any reason like that. But the bottom line is, the fact is that people do separate over some of these things that do happen. So the opinion that we might have, the idea we might have about what strong meat is, becomes very important, brethren, with regard to how we define it. Because some people think, you know, a guy up here yelling and screaming, ranting and raving, sweating like a hog, you know, he's got his handkerchief out, and he's wiping his face, and boy, he's just going at it. That's strong meat. Boy, I just hear Jesus coming out of his heart, you know. And people are running back and forth, and he's, going ahead and convorting and getting people's attention, and they're watching him, and he's doing these things, different types of things, or speaking in tongues, breaking out in that excitement, in that expression, and they start going into this gibberish or jabberish, and somebody in the back stands up and says, I know what he's talking about, I know what he's talking about. And he stands up and he interprets what the guy is saying from the stage. It becomes a circus. It becomes a center stage circus. And yet you'll see it on television. I could name names, and you know some of these names. They've been on there for years. And these guys have 5 jet airplanes. They live in homes that are 50,000 square feet. It might be a little exaggeration, but you know what I'm talking about. Yes. He's got 2 or 3 homes, or she. The bottom line is, that these things are confusing to people. They are very confusing to people. Some people interpret the fact that deliverance ministries are indeed strong meat. We got a guy in Akron, Ohio. He's get people up on the stage, he goes, "Be healed," and hit you on the forehead and fall down, and these people would fall down and they'd pick him up and the guy'd be flapping like a fish out of water and you're going, "Whoa, what's wrong with him?" And lo and behold, people are like, "That's strong meat. Man, you gotta have the Holy Spirit to see that, Robert's talking about the miracle in your life. A soft, quiet voice that causes you to recognize certain truths that you were led to believe were not true, but are indeed true, because God's word confirms it. That begins our journey here in defining what strong meat is. It's a good setup, good presentation, by the way, because it gives us substance to begin to understand how God is indeed calling and working with each of us in our lives. And all of this menagerie, noise, execution of exercised emotions, beware, brethren. A lot of that is just all on the surface. There's no depth to it. It's all about feeling and the things that go along with that. Let me interrupt myself. Am I on, by the way? Is this? Okay, I didn't know if I turned it on. I forgot. But at any rate, I think it's important that all of us understand what strong meat is. And so I want to take some time today with the remaining portion that I have left to explore some scriptures, to go down this rabbit hole a little bit and dig deep into what is strong meat, and using scripture and our Bible for our guidance, because it is very important that we ourselves understand this, as you will see going forward, because I'm here to tell you, brethren, the percentage of possibilities are high. Another shoe will drop. This is an election year in the United States of America that is on the precipice of such tension unlike ever before. And there are issues that are growing in what you could say substance and growing in proof of things that were labeled conspiracy that are no longer conspiracy. Like I said, all you've got to do is, the difference between conspiracy and truth is about 6 months, depending on what the issue is. Sometimes it takes a year. Sometimes it might take a year and a half or 2 years for it to untangle out of all the riffraff till finally it hits the surface and the proof is now available. Sadly, classified information is unfortunately a big means by which a lot of truth is covered up and or hidden from all of us. And that falls, of course, into what we consider to be a conspiracy. But the bottom line is, we are heading into an election year that is going to be quite a rough ride as we get close to that November election date. And consequently, you can almost be assured that there will be, I say almost, I don't know for sure, but I certainly say, again, the possibilities are high, another shoe will drop along the way. Maybe a few will drop along the way. But I think it's important, because these shoes that are going to drop are indeed designed to divide us, are designed to get under the skin of God's church and break it up from the inside if we allow it. And we've got to be cognizant, aware, and protective of our spiritual communities, meaning the church, of not allowing external, secular information to get between us. So therefore, it becomes important, again, let me emphasize, for all of us to recognize what is strong meat, because you will find what I'm about to share with you is an inoculation. It's a help that if indeed you can embrace it, put your arms around it, accept it, and most importantly, exercise the behaviors that are needed, then you will be inoculated yourself personally, and your community, church community, will indeed experience protection from these divisive forces that are on the outside coming to you from the secular world, designed to break up your spiritual peace of mind. Hebrews chapter 5. Let's start there. Hebrews chapter 5. We read here about a situation. The writer is basically explaining to us that Christ is a high priest after a very unique order. It's a divine order. It's not a Levitical order. It's not from the earth. It is an order that has no beginning. It has no end. It has no genealogical record, as we're told in the book of Hebrews. It is after the order of this individual that met Abraham way back in Genesis 14 and essentially shared with him wine and bread at that time when Abraham was coming back from the battle of the kings. He, this name, Melchizedek, is essentially a name that Christ did not adopt and or appoint unto himself. We're told there in basically verse 5, he says, so also Christ glorified not himself to be made of a high priest, this is 5:5, but he that said unto him, you are my son. It came from the Father. It came from the Father, and the Father here is quoting basically the book of Psalms. He says in verse 6, and he says also in another place, you are a priest after the order of Melchizedek, and that Psalms was from Psalms 110. And so essentially we're told here from the writer writing Hebrews, as he cites the Old Testament for stamping validation and authenticity, he says, this being Christ, this Savior, Messiah, is after a different priesthood, the Melchizedek priesthood. And it's not from this earth. It is of a higher order, an order that all of us should respect and, of course, concede to. And he proceeds through this up to about 10, claiming in verse 10, chapter 5, book of Hebrews, he says, called of God a high priest after the order of Melchizedek. And he basically resolves that portion of the introduction of chapter 5 and begins now to take a turn to those he's writing to in this book in verse 11 of chapter 5, the book of Hebrews. He says here, of whom we have many things to say and hard to be uttered. Now watch this. However, it's hard to say these things to you about Melchizedek because you're dull of hearing. Whoa. Whoa. Where's he going with this? So he says, you're dull of hearing. For the time you ought to be teachers. You have need of still being taught, basically, is what he's saying. He's saying, you have need that one teach you again, which be the first principles of the oracles of God. In other words, you're still in fundamentals, you're still in basics, and are become such as have need of milk and not, watch this now, strong meat. Ooh, okay. Verse 13, for everyone that uses milk is unskillful. I won't share my Greek with you because it's all Greek to me, but another interpretation of this is basically, for all intents and purposes, could be translated, has no experience. Experience in what? Everyone that uses milk is unexperienced in the word of righteousness, for he's a babe. The implication, he's not exercising something. The righteousness, what's that? It's behavior. Okay, so he goes on here, and he says, for he is a babe. Verse 14 now, strong meat belongs to them that are perfect, and or, another interpretation would be, mature. That's what that means, of full age, mature. That strong meat belongs to them that are mature, even those who by reason of use Or another interpretation would be, in the Greek, of a habit. Those who by reason of habit have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. So what he's saying here is those that are involved in strong meat are exercising judgments, assessments, evaluations of the circumstances they're involved with, they contend with, whether it's in relationship with their wives or their children or at work or with students at school or wherever it may be. How you interact in the behavioral patterns that you have according to this word. That's the standard. According to this word is the strong meat. So how are you doing? He says, these people are dull of hearing. They warm a seat, they come, they go to Georgia, they go, you know. Just all in fun. and they come and they go and they're not getting it. They're not digesting it. They're not embracing it, and they're not allowing it to be inculcated into their personalities to create what we call, you're all familiar with this word, conversion. Conversion. If you remain the way you were when you came, just as I am, well, you're not supposed to stay that way. That's what he's driving at here, because look where he goes now into chapter 6. And I'm going to read, if I can find it here on my phone, because I set it up this morning. So bear with me. I know enough on these things just to be dangerous. But he says in chapter 6, he's going to get into some of the meat and potato of this particular subject. And he's going to shift on us a little bit. And I want to share with you the language from the Weymouth translation of the New Testament Bible that says a little bit easier to understand and puts it into a more modern vernacular for all of us. Because in chapter 6, remember, the translators made the Bible into chapters and verses. This was all a letter, so it's all in flow here. We're all in context. So he's in a theme here. He starts out with, you're all dull of hearing because some of you are not exercising what you should be exercising. You know better, but you're still stuck on the fundamentals. So we got to get a little bit stronger and get off the milk and start eating the strong meat. And we still haven't defined exactly what the strong meat is, but we will as we proceed here. But we're going to let the Bible guide us. So, in chapter 6, in the book of Hebrews, chapter 6, out of the Weymouth translation, which is a direct translation right from the manuscripts of the Greek, he says here, therefore, leaving the elementary instruction about the Christ, let us advance to mature manhood and not be continually relaying the foundation of repentance and lifeless works, faith in God, teaching about ceremonial washings, laying on of hands, the resurrection of the dead, and the last judgment. And advance we will, knowing all those things, we'll advance in doctrine. There's no question about it. As time goes on, if we are living right and doing the right things as a church community, God will lead us in understanding more of the fundamentals of the doctrines. He will give us the increase if he allows us. But that's not my subject. That's what he says. This is not my subject. We don't need about, I know that when I die, I'm not going to heaven. I'm going to sleep in the grave. I'm not going to hell. I'm not, my mom, dad, they're not burning there forever under Satan's supervision while God the Father allows all that to be maintained. I mean, what kind of God would that be in the first place? That would allow some place like that to be maintained and supervised by a fallen angel. It doesn't even make sense. When you think it through, we're talking about the day and age that we're living in, with a day and age of truth. Well, how about thinking about that? How truth is that? How can you say God is God of love when he's maintaining a place where people, the guy down in South America or all the Muslims and all the Buddhists and the Hindus, they're all burning in hell because they didn't know the name of Jesus Christ, because the Bible says it's the only name by which salvation can come from. It's not Buddha. It's not Muhammad. So if that's true, they're all burning in hell under Satan the devil's supervision while God the Father sits back there and enjoys the vision of it all? I mean, how would you in heaven enjoy knowing your heavenly position you're in of your mom and dad or your loved ones burning in hell because they didn't accept Christ and you did. It's insane. It doesn't even make theological sense. But people believe these things, brethren. They believe these things. But we don't. We know these fundamentals. Okay, so what? Christmas is pagan. Easter's pagan. St. Valentine's Day we just celebrated. I didn't. I hope you didn't. But at any rate, bottom line is that too's pagan. We know all these things. But we're not going to relay those today. Because those are fundamentals. That goes without saying. We're going to move on here, and we're going to go into some additional readings. So he picks up in verse 4. For it is impossible. He digresses because he's going to use this as a segue to get us where he wants us to go. He says this, for it is impossible in the case of those who have once for all been enlightened and have tasted the sweetness of the heavenly gift and have been partakers of the Holy Spirit and have realized how good the Word of God is and how mighty are the powers of the coming age, and then falls away. It's impossible, I say, to keep bringing these people, them back, that is, to a new repentance. For to their own undoing, they are repeatedly crucifying the Son of God afresh and exposing him, Christ, to open shame. What's he talking about? He's talking about a lifestyle. He's talking about them in and day out. Yeah, they hear what they hear at church. Yeah, they know what they read in their Bible studies. Oh, yeah, they read articles from this magazine and that magazine. They got it all down pat, 2020, no big deal. I've got it. It's in here. But then they go right back to doing what they're doing in opposition to what they know is right according to the definition of what Jesus Christ defines as righteousness. And that is what he's talking about. That it is, if you're going to live like that, what are you doing to yourself? You're getting and allowing yourself to be in a position of unrepentance. That is the unpardonable sin. God will always accept you back upon repentance. There's no question about it. But if you're living a lifestyle, at some point, what's going to happen? Your heart is going to be hardened. And ultimately, what will occur? You will, through compromise, be led to abandonment. That's what happens. Compromise is the incremental step into the water of abandonment. This is what this writer here in Hebrews is trying to tell us. It's impossible, I say, to keep bringing them back to new repentance, for to their own undoing, this is verse 6 again, I'm just reiterating, they are repeatedly crucifying the Son of God afresh, exposing him to open shame. For the land which has drunk, now he shifts to the good guy, for the land which has drunk to the rain that often falls upon it brings forth vegetation and useful to those whose sakes indeed it is tilled, has a share in God's blessings. But, verse 8, if it only yields a mass of thorns and briars, it is considered worthless and is in danger of being cursed, and in the end will be destroyed by fire. But we, even while we speak in this tone, so he's trying to soften it now. He's taking a back step here, and he's saying, look, I'm being hard on you, and even though I'm speaking in this tone, he's going to tell them he recognizes something about them that is complimentary. And he proceeds to attempt to encourage them. He says, but we, even while we speak in this tone, have a happier conviction concerning you, my dearly loved friends, a conviction of things which point towards salvation. For God is not unjust, so that he is unmindful of your labor and of the love. And I want to focus on this Greek word. We're going to come back to it, but let me here initially introduce it to you. This is agape. We're going to talk a lot about that today because it is instrumental, critical, and underscores defining what strong meat is. Let me just finish this section out. He says here, for God is not an unjust God. He is unmindful of your labor. He is not unmindful of your labor and of the agape which you have manifested. Agape can be manifested. You can recognize agape in action. You can profile agape. If you and I can profile it, what do you think God can do? He can read it like a book. He's got no problem. He knows just by watching. He doesn't even have to talk to you. He can tell by your body language. He can tell by what you do, because guess what? That's what defines you, not what you say. What you do is what defines you. He says here, which you, the people, have manifested toward himself in having rendered services to his people and in still rendering them. But we long for each of you to continue to manifest the same earnestness with a view of your enjoying fullness of hope to the very end, so that you may not become half-hearted, but be limitators of those who through faith and patience endures, are now heirs to the promise. And so here we see that basically what he's saying is, look, as much as you may be dull in hearing, and as much as you may not understand what indeed you need to do in order to get off the milk and onto the strong meat, the fact is you are doing it to a certain extent. Continue to do it, because it's important that this agape, this love, is indeed manifested and continues to be manifested. And that is the hard part. Robert brought it up a little bit. He didn't touch on it a whole lot, but he did it in passing. That consistency, continuity, the ongoing maintenance of is a real challenge in a world that we live in, brethren. Why? Things change. Robert and I, we could be best buddies today, but something might come up, because life's dynamic, that could risk, challenge, jeopardize our relationship just because of a certain different view of this, that, or the other thing. And we've got to be aware of that. And I'm submitting to all of us today, agape is critical in insulating us from those divisive forces that work to conquer and divide. Turn to John chapter 13. Jesus here is talking to his disciples. They're up in the upper room. It's the night in which he was betrayed. They just washed feet. They're around the table. They're all surrounded. They're all talking. A lot of jibber-jabber going on. And Judas essentially gets possessed by Satan, the devil himself. Verse 27, the Greek word means entered in. He went in. Satan entered in to Judas. He took him over. This is not vexation. This is possession. And Judas was now in the grips of Satan, the devil. The word entered there in verse 27 is basically what that's all about. It's to go into, it's to be set, shall enter in. And as a result, they asked who's going to betray him. He said, the one that I'm going to share the sop with. He shared the sop with Judas, we understand. Judas gets up. He leaves the room. Verse 30, they having received the sop, he went immediately out, and it was night. So Judas leaves the room. He's left with his 11 buddies and a few women up there in the upper room. They're still discussing. They're still eating. Foot washing was over, and now Jesus is going to start talking again. And he says here in verse 31, he says, now is the Son of Man glorified. God's going to be glorified in him. If God be glorified in him, God shall also glorify him, himself, and shall straightway glorify him. Little children, yet a little while I'm with you. You shall seek me. But as I said unto the Jews, where I'm going, you cannot come. So now I say it to you. You can't come with me, like I told the Jews. However, he says this now. A new commandment I'm going to give unto you, that you love. Oh, what's this? Not agape. Not agape. Oh, it's not agape. It's agape. What? Yeah, watch this. A new commandment I give unto you, that you agape one another. As I have loved you, that you also agape one another. Agape, what does that mean? That means to be civil. It means to be familial, to be mannerly, to be polite, to be civil with each other, to at least have that kind of commonality with each other so that you can have a community with each other. a peaceful community that is unified under whatever you mutually are in position for or on a mission to accomplish. But then he takes it and ramps it up now. And in this verse, in 35, he says this, "By this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have agape one to another." Oh, okay. So we're going to ramp this up. So I need to have more than just a civil relationship with you. I need to be more than just polite and mannerly. I've got to cross over this barrier, this line, and become something to you in addition to what I am in terms of being civil, mannerly, polite, and mutual in whatever we may think or believe in. So he says here, agape. So what does agape have that's different? It has two major things, brethren, and this is what I'm going to talk on and focus on in terms of defining it. It has two major distinctions over agapeho. One, affection. Oh, affection. So what does that mean? It means basically gentle feeling of fondness, liking, warmth of heart, tender-hearted. Benevolence. What's benevolence mean? A loving contribution, a free gift, the quality of being well-meaning, kindness, care for others above self. Whoa. This is not easy to do, because what now you're doing is you're transgressing into my time and space, because if I have to be inconvenienced, that's another thing. I mean, I understand caring about you, but I mean, I got things to do, places to go, people to see. Like Robert was telling us, all these people that were invited to the party and didn't show up. You know. So what does this mean? Well, you're going to find out here in a little bit as we proceed through these scriptures. But the fact of it is, brethren, I want you to keep in mind, when we talk about agape, we're talking about affection and benevolence. There's an A, B, C to this. I want you to get that in mind, A, B, C. A is affection, B is benevolence, C remains to be identified, but you'll see what I'm talking about because it's identified as action or an action. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. I'm disclosing where I'm going with this. 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Paul says this to basically the Corinthian congregation. And in essence is essentially the same thing the writer of Hebrews was talking about in chapter 6 that we just read. He's saying, look, put these things in perspective. If you, he says here, though I speak with tongues of men and of angels, I can speak in different languages, and apparently what he might be meaning here is he might at the snap of a finger be able to start speaking a language he don't know. Like me, I don't know Spanish, I don't know French, I don't know any other language but English. And all of a sudden I'm up here starting to speak German or French or whatever it may be, and I can do it upon call, assuming, of course, there's an interpreter there. Sadly, the Corinthians were using it as leverage for ego tripping and so on, and that's what he was correcting some of them about, because it wasn't a game, it wasn't a tool to be, flaunted around, in a manner that was almost delinquent. So he says here, look, I speak with tongues of men and angels, I have not agape. Interesting. Charity, it's translated. I like the word charity. You know why? Because it shows you what the result is of agape. Agape results in charity. What is charity? To give without expectation of return. To give without reciprocation. To give without any expectation from you because I know you're in need and you're genuine about it. You're not scamming me. I'm more than happy to give you. And that is not the easiest thing to do, especially when you're giving to someone without expecting to be paid back. So he says here, though, I am become as sounding brass or tinkling cymbal. I'm just a noise if I do this. And though I have the gift of prophecy, I understand all mysteries. To Robert's point in his sermonette, I got them all down. I know them all. And I got all knowledge. And though I have all faith, so that I could remove mountains and have not affection, have not benevolence. Remember what those words mean. If you forget, look them up later. Remember, agape is pushing you and me to be affectionate and to be benevolent to one another. He says, if I have not affection and benevolence, I'm nothing. And though I bestow all my goods to feed the poor, and though I give my body to be burned, martyred, and have not benevolence and affection, it doesn't profit me anything. If I'm doing it all for show, I'm doing it all for my own gain, my own reputation, my own notoriety, if this is why I'm doing it, because it's not about me caring about you, it's not about me being benevolent of you, it's not about me protecting you, it's about me going down as some kind of notoriety person, some kind of big name personality of sort. I'm on the wrong page. I'm on the wrong page if that's the case, if that's what's driving my works and my behavior. Verse 4, affection and benevolence suffers long. It's kind. Affection and benevolence envies not. Affection, benevolence, vaunts not itself. It's not puffed up. It's not egocentric. It's not egotistical. It's not filled with vanity. He goes on, does not behave itself unseemly, seeks not its own, it's not easily provoked, or the Greek word could mean stirred or angered, same thing. Thinks no evil, that is with ill will. I want to tear your head off, You owe me, buddy. I'm going to get you. And a lot of people think that way. You do that to me? Well, you haven't seen the last of me yet, because I'm coming after you. And if I'm not coming after you, I'll find somebody to do it for me. And there are people that do that. And they put hitmen on you. Bears all things, verse 7, chapter 13, 1 Corinthians. Believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Verse 8, affection, benevolence never fails. But whether there be prophecies, they shall fail. Whether they be tongues, they shall cease. Whether there be knowledge, it shall all vanish away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. When I was a child, when I was on milk, I gave up the milk and started eating the meat. That's basically where he's saying. That's why a lot of people think that Hebrews was written by Paul, because there's a similar theme in other parts of the epistles that we know he wrote, but of which seem to overlay and or are facts, relationship-wise, like a facsimile of Hebrews. So he goes on here and he says, but when that which is perfect is come, then that which is in part shall be done away. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, I understood as a child, I thought as a child, but when I became a man, I put away childish things. And that's that principle of eating now strong meat. For now we see through a glass darkly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then shall I know even all, as also I am known when the time comes, he says. Verse 13, and now abide in faith, hope, and charity. However, out of these three, the greatest of these three, faith and hope, taken secondary and positions below or alongside, but in a lower formation, charity, meaning affection and benevolence. Affection and benevolence trumps, pardon the pun, trumps everything. And that's important to recognize, brethren. That's the threshold that we've got to cross over in the long run. There's got to be an affection and benevolence toward each other. Yes, we should be civil. It goes without saying. Yes, we should have manners toward one another, politeness. We should mutually respect each other for who we are and what we may bring to the community of Christians and our congregation and all that. All that goes without saying. But to really care to the point where you're willing to sacrifice for your brother or your sister because you're affectionately connected to them and you know them. What's that mean? That means obviously that we're expected as Christians to develop relationships, to have relationships. That's why fellowship is so important in congregations, because congregations give you the opportunity, the forum of the laboratory, the lab environment to express your characteristics, to put into action these behaviors by which should generate righteousness in your life, producing the kind of ground that was mentioned there in Hebrews 6 that brings forth vegetation and food that is good to give life to others, blessings to others, unlike the other which brings forth thorns and briars. And so it's important we act on these things, and that's what he is saying here. Verse 13, the last verse here, faith, hope, and charity, these three, but the greatest of these is charity. A, affection. B, benevolence. C, the result is charity. A, B, C. It's real simple, brethren. We need to keep this in mind. Now, how does this play out? Well, let's move over here to Titus for a moment. How does this play out? What are we really talking about, Paul, in this? What are you driving at? Well, here's how some of this plays out. Verse 1 of chapter 2, the book of Titus, we read this. But speak you the things which become sound doctrine, that aged men, you be vigilant. Doesn't mean to be sober, meaning, refrain from drinking. It means be vigilant, be in tune, be connected, be active, be proactive. Don't allow yourself to sleep at the switch. Set the examples. He says here, the aged men, you be vigilant, grave, temperate, sound in faith, and in affection, benevolence. You'd never see that in that word charity, but that's agape. It's agape. It's sitting right there. And it says charity. And it means basically affection and, again, benevolence. In patience, aged women, likewise, that they be in behavior as becomes holiness, or holy women. Not false accusers, not given to much wine, teachers of good things, that they may teach the younger women to be sober or to be wise. That's what that means, to be sober, to be wise, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home. I see women in God's church sometimes where they show cleavage. They walk around in church services in some cases, illustrating some of this. Not discreet. Nothing wrong with it in terms of it actually being a sin, but it's really not discreet. It's not right that sometimes ladies would wear those kinds of things, especially, frankly, in public. Because what are you asking for in terms of that? That's what you need to get at in terms of the reason. Men with long hair. What does the Bible say? What's Paul say about that? It means it's a shame. You have long hair looking like a woman. That's a shame. Now, the church doesn't have a policy where you're going to throw you out of the church, but be it known to you that when you're walking around looking like that, you're shaming God. And if you're okay with that, well, hey, guess what? Then we have to accept these things. Be not judgmental. Affectionate, benevolent. Here comes somebody with a mask. Oh, I don't believe in them. I'm a filtration guy. I know those masks don't work. But that person feels better with a mask. Oh, okay. It's your choice. Oh, I'm taking that shot. There go, we're off the internet now. Well, I'm not. Over my dead body. And people are at odds with one another over some of these things. This is what I'm talking about, brethren. The strong meat in that is not taking the shot or taking the shot. That's not the strong meat. The strong meat is, how do you deal with it? How are you behaving with it? How are you accepting it? Do you still invite the individual who's wearing the mask over to your house and not judge them and just include them in everything as you would normally do? I hope you would, because that's what we're talking about. We don't let masks, we don't let shots, we don't let these things divide us and then ultimately conquer us, because that's what these things are designed to do. And it's important in the community of the church that we are embracing affection toward one another and benevolence, and thereby hopefully resulting in the exercise of certain charities in our lifestyles with one another. It goes on here, and he says, in all things, showing yourself a pattern of good works. Verse 7, this is chapter 2, book of Titus. In doctrine, showing uncorruptness, gravity, sincerity, sound speech, that cannot be condemned, that he that is of contrary part may be ashamed, having no evil to say of you. Exhort servants, I always replace that today in our 21st century as employees. Be obedient to your employers. We are indentured servants to the companies that we work for. That's meaning we get paid for services rendered, indentured servants. And so in that respect, we have a directive here in verse 9 as employees to be obedient to your employers, please them well in all things, not disputing. That means this Greek word comes translated answering, comes from a word that could also mean dispute or challenge. Again, not purloining. Purloining means stealing or embezzling. They're not going to miss that crescent wrench. I'll just take it home. They'll just buy another one. I'll put it in my pocket and go home, that kind of a thing. Or the guy who owns the business, kind of like a lady who hires a guy, pays him a big salary, and then he kind of reciprocates by giving her vacations to go to other places. It's a nice way to get a raise also. That's purloining. You're embezzling in this case. You're taking money off the top or out of the company and not recording it and essentially cheating the employees because they're there working for you, and yeah, you've got the equity position, but you want your equity now as well as later when you sell the business. That's wrong, brother. That's not the Christian way. But showing all good fidelity, honesty, forthrightness. You don't over-exaggerate the value of your properties. You don't do those things. You basically deal with things in an open fashion, transparent fashion, that they may adorn the doctrine of God, our Savior. That's what it's all about, because Christ wouldn't do those things. For the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared unto all men. He goes on there, but I want to go over here because time is running on me. 1 Timothy chapter 5, real quick. This is how it plays out. This is how affection, benevolence, generates charity to the glory of God and Jesus Christ. And here in 1 Timothy chapter 5, we read this: rebuke not an elder, but entreat him as a father, and the younger men as brethren. Elderly ladies, women, as mothers, younger as sisters, with all purity. It just breaks my heart when I read stories of pastors and elders that leverage their relationships with their congregants for sexual advantage or for money or for whatever it is. That is just rotten to the core, evil in so many respects, brethren. And what it's saying here is we don't do those things. We go ahead, you honor your widows that are widows indeed. What's a widow indeed? A widow indeed is a widow without a family. A widow indeed has no children, no sisters, no brothers, no husband, or vice versa with the woman. And so she's a widow indeed. Okay, so where do we go with that? We'll get back to it here in a minute. But if any widow, verse 4, have children or nephews, oh boy, children or nephews, children of the sister or the brother of the one who now is left, the widow. Let them learn first to show kindness or piety. In other words, take care of your own. Take care of your own. Goes on, at home. And to requite their parents, for that is good and acceptable before God. How many kids are still living in the basement of their parents, living off their parents until they're 30 years old? Generation Z. Not all of them. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to just, whitewash everybody in that category. But that is what is happening. There's statistics that are proving this. When, in fact, the kid who's 30 years old, whoever they may be, they ought to be contributing back to mom and dad a little bit. Because mom and dad, perhaps at this time in their lives, they're on fixed incomes. And so the kids ought to rise to the occasion, especially if there's brothers and sisters, and take care of mom and dad, or at least supplement them a little bit. Maybe pay for a vacation. Send them to Aruba, Send them to Jamaica, whatever it may be. But on behalf of the kids, hey, mom, hey, dad, here's 2 tickets. Go, have fun, It'd be fun. That's what the Bible's telling. That's affection in action. That's benevolence. And what does it generate? 2 airplane tickets. That's charity. That's charity. Or a new car. Or just maybe a new couch, because the couch is a mess, and you took your mom out shopping, you didn't tell her, it was kind of subtle, undercover, trying to find what she likes, what she doesn't like, and then you find out what she likes and what she doesn't like, and you buy what she likes and has it delivered to the door, and she opens up the door and there's a brand new couch coming in. Wow, wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? That's what the kids ought to be doing. The children should be doing this. That's what the Bible's saying. Affection, benevolence. He says here, now she that is a widow indeed and desolate trusts in God, continues in supplication and prayers night and day. But she that lives in pleasure, single girl, maybe a divorcee, is dead while she lives, if she's living in pleasure. And these things give in charge that they may be blameless. The ministry is responsible for vetting this out so that the community doesn't get taken advantage of. Goes on. But if any provide not for his own, if you men who have wives and children don't maintain the job that is needed to bring home the bacon, you're first responsible. The men are. They're first responsible. Ladies can contribute, of course. Wives can contribute and go to work if indeed it's agreed and so on, and it's compatible and mutual and what have you, and they work as a team, especially if they don't have any children, to build up a little treasure chest, trove of sorts and money and revenue for the coming of a child. That's planning. That's organization. That's what it's all about, in working a plan for that. But the bottom line is here, you are told that you must take care of your own house. He that denies the faith, he's worse than an infidel. Now, let not a widow be taken into number under 60 years old. So a widow under 60 years old, this is a widow indeed. She's got to take care of herself. She'd still work if she's in good health, of course. That's his assumption. He goes on here, he says, under 60 years old, having been the wife of one man, well reported of for good works, if she has brought up children, has lodged strangers, washed saints' feet, has relieved the afflicted, and is diligently following every good work. This is a good woman, and she's a widow, and she's got a reputation of being selfless. She's affectionate. She's benevolent. She's reaching out. She's welcoming people into her home or whatever, making pots of stew and taking them over to sick people or whatever it may be. But this is a good woman, and essentially she certainly would qualify. Dropping down to verse 16, I'm going to skip 11 through 15. You can go back and read that because time's running out on me here. If any man or woman, verse 16 now, chapter 5, book of 1 Timothy. If any man or woman that believes has widows, let them relieve them. If my mom was a widow, it's my responsibility to take care of my mom. And my dad, widower. Goes both ways. Goes both ways. It'd be my responsibility to take care of my dad. Maybe he can't handle the house anymore, so we sell the house, he moves in with me. That's what we do. That's what Christians do. And he says here in verse 16, let them relieve them, and let not the church be charged. Oh, now that's a two-edged sword there, because the congregation is also responsible for having some money to take care of certain things if indeed those things might arise. Affection, benevolence. This is a family. This is a family. And when you marry a lady or a man, you have plans. You've got to earn certain monies. You save money for emergencies. You do all these things. What's a congregation supposed to do? Congregation is a community of affection, benevolence, and charity. But sadly, there are people that do indeed take advantage of that. And that's what you've got to vet and be careful of. And watch that the community, because guess what? It's your money going to whomever. And essentially the church is a trust. And you're trusting the ministry, who are the trustees, to manage those funds for appropriate and legitimate reasons. I've had people come to our church services. I remember this one guy, he had a circuit. He would hit churches. He had a circuit, and he'd give you a sad story about his mother. In this case, it was his mother who was dead. She was in the morgue up in Detroit. I was in a different location down in southern Ohio at a congregation down there, a CGI congregation. And this guy would come every 3 months on a circuit and would hit us about every 3 months. The host down there, he wasn't a pastor or an elder, but he was a deacon who managed our congregation at this location, told me about it. Lo and behold, finally, I was there, he came. So I took him in the back. We sat down in the office, and he told me his mother was dead. She was in a morgue up in Detroit, Michigan, and he needed a bus ticket. He needed $200 for a bus ticket to go to Detroit. I said, okay, well, come on, let's talk about it. And I said, so your mom's in a morgue up in Detroit? What's the hospital? Detroit General, whatever. Oh, okay. I went 411. Back then, we didn't have the phones. I went 411, got the phone number for the hospital, called the hospital, asked them to connect me to the morgue. He's sitting there in the office, and guess what? His mother wasn't there. So I hung up the phone and I said, I guess she got up and left. She's not there. And then he kind of went, well, that wasn't the hospital, So then we went through this about 45 minutes to an hour. Finally, I said, please get out of here and never come back. That's what I told him. That's what I told him. And I didn't feel guilty about it at all. And I found out that this guy has a circuit. He's hitting a bunch of churches, and that's how he was making his living. He was panhandling churches. That's what he was doing. He was on a little circuit. So these are things, brethren, that again, affection, benevolence, generating charity equals charity is all about right here. And how this plays out is what they're saying. Let the elders that rule well, look at this. Here we go. Let the elders that rule well be counted worthy of double honor, especially they who labor in the word and doctrine. What does that mean? That means you should be paying your elder eventually. How do you pay your elder? I'm being paid. I worked for 30 years as a mechanical engineer in water treatment and fluid processing, wastewater recirculating and reclaiming and all, but that was that life. The last 20 years I've been working for the church and drawing a little salary. And I say a little. But the bottom line is, we are responsible as a church community. That's why tithing and so forth goes to all of that. CGI, we only have about 4 or 5 ministers that are on salary. Roughly out of the 35 or 40, about 10% of our ministers are salaried. Jeff Reed, Mike James, Van Stinson, myself, and I think Charles Gross is taking a stipend. He's kind of semi-retired. But not many of the other 30 are either retired, living off of their pensions, or working still in whatever jobs that they do. But the bottom line is, brethren, this is how, and this is what we have to get in our minds. Nothing's free in our world that we live in, and as a result, we're being told here in 1 Timothy how Paul is instructing this young minister to handle the people that he's going to be dealing with here. He says here in verse 17, let the elders rule, verse 18, for the scripture says, you shall not muzzle the ox that treads out the corn, and the laborer is worthy of his reward. Against an elder, receive not an accusation, but before 2 or 3 witnesses. When we received the accusations against Garner Ted Armstrong, it wasn't just one person. We went for others to find out what was going on here and whether or not it was true. You never receive an accusation by one person against somebody. And I'll tell you right now, today, I don't know about you, but it is really surreal in the sense of what they can do now with masks, artificial intelligence. I just heard a radio program yesterday. I was trying to hook my phone up to my rental car, and I got distracted because the program was kind of interesting. The guy was talking about artificial intelligence, and he said, now we're going to have President Biden, this is a fake, he says, on the radio, because it turned out to be an interview with a CEO of an artificial intelligence company. That's what he generates. He generates artificial intelligence. So they were interviewing him, and it was a kind of a talk show type thing. And he says, now this is not President Biden, but it sounds like him, and we're going to have you listen and hear what he says. He said this outrageously. I won't tell you about what he said, but at any rate, it sounded like him. If you did not know and get preempted with the fact that it wasn't him, you'd say, what's going on here? And so the point being is that they can have people looking like people. Look at this most recent thing with Swift. What's her name? Taylor Swift, yeah. And this nudity thing that they put her head on a body and then went ahead and drew her up naked and showed her publicly on the internet. And she's suing them, of course, but the bottom line is this artificial intelligence, as this CEO said, is going to become in the future some of the most outrageous technology that you've ever seen. And they are going to really have to get their arms around it because it's going to be very hard to tell truth from falsity. And it brings me back to Revelation chapter 13, where it talks about the false prophet who does all these wondrous miracles that you and I, if we're alive at that time, will watch on television, which it could all be green screened. It could all be a fake. It could all be just manipulation of smoke and mirrors as television is. And I know because I've been in TV for 20-some years now. And so there's a lot of things you can do with green screens and CGI, meaning computer-generated images. That's what I mean by that. So bottom line is here, brethren, we are in some really strange and difficult times. And needless to say, what I hope you're beginning to see here as I try to wrap this up is that what affection, benevolence, and charity requires is sacrifice. I'm going to give you some words here. Forgiveness, reconciliation, commitment, long-suffering, hopefulness, caring, communication, abandoning our will for the will perhaps of someone else in serving them. The ministry of the CGI has a servant eldership orientation, a format, an approach that we try to teach all of our new ministers about, whereby it is essentially selflessness being taught to serve the people. We are the inverted pyramid, if I can use that, where the ministry is at the bottom supporting the people. And that's what the ministry of the CGI is focused on in doing the best that they can to maintain that kind of relationship with the congregations that we interact with. James chapter 2, brethren. Go to James chapter 2, homework, read that chapter. It's all about the question of how one proves his faith without his works. Well, I will show you my faith by my works. And that's the distinctive difference with what we're talking about here, because that's what makes strong meat, in doing the right thing even when it doesn't necessarily benefit you. Sacrificing things for someone else other than yourself without the expectation of reciprocation. That's important. That's important to grasp and to begin to wrap your arms around. So in closing, let me turn over here to Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes, and in chapter 12, we read this as Solomon wrote these words of wisdom for us. In verse 8, chapter 12, last chapter of the book, he says, "Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. All is vanity in this world. And moreover, because the preacher was wise, he still taught the people knowledge. Yea, he gave good heed and sought out and set in order many proverbs. Because even me being up here is vanity, 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 vanity. You know, I'm flapping my jaw trying to teach here a little bit, share with you certain scriptures and perspectives that in my heart and in my mind I believe have value for you. And believe it or not, it has value for me because I'm my own best student. Oftentimes, I've often said that because so much of what I prepare I never get a chance to talk about because of the time limitation. But the fact of it is I have other material then that I maybe work in later on with other sermons. Point being, though, brother, the point being is that all is vanity. And we've got to control it because it's not about us. It's not about you. It's about God's people, God's plan for you, and ultimately serving humanity in the world-ruling government that you're being prepared for in the millennium for starts. But that's just the warm-up phase. Don't get your mind focused on the 1,000-year millennium. That's just the first round. After that, the Father's coming back. He's bringing New Jerusalem. There's going to be a new heaven, new earth. And guess what? Hallelujah, here we go out into eternity. As spirit beings with no Satan the devil, he's wound up, never to be able to interact again, we're told. That's a great time. That's the time that I'm really looking forward to. The millennium, sure, that's all fine and dandy, and I get that. But what I'm really looking forward to is when it's all done, the earth kind of burns up, and we're all spirit beings, and we can embrace one another. Hey, you made it, man! Yeah, there you are. Hope that, oh yeah, man, you know. I mean, that's the real time that we're all looking forward to essentially conclude in our lives. So he goes on here in verse 10. He says, "Preacher sought to find out acceptable words, and that which was written was upright, even words of truth. The words of the wise are as goads," or courage and pray to urge. In other words, what I'm trying to do, what Robert tried to do, is we are trying to urge you. We're goading you. We're trying to motivate you to understand affection, benevolence is important in the development of charity. Without charity, you're behind the 8 ball. You need that. The way to get charity is learn to be affectionate. Learn to be benevolent. How you do that? Develop relationships, attend services, go out after and do certain things with each other during the week even. Maybe you can't physically because you're all too spread out, but at least call one another. Hey, I'm thinking of you. I've been praying about your health. You know, haven't seen you in church for a while. How you doing? You know, be active. It's not always George's position or Richard's position as elders or John's as a deacon. No. It's ours. It's our ministry in that respect. And each of us can bring something to the table, hopefully to help us out in that area. So he goes on here, goads and as nails, that's what pegs, it fastens, and masters of assembly, which are given from one shepherd. And further, by these, my son, be admonished of making many books. Put this in perspective, there's no end. And much study is a weariness of the flesh. I'll tell you what, you can get hooked up in that internet, and there's just so much out there. You can't read it all. You can't hear it all. You can't listen to it all. There's no way. He says, and it'll always be there. That's what this guy is saying here. That's what Solomon is saying. Look, weariness of the flesh. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. And here's the conclusion finally, so I'm going to sit down. He says here, fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every word into judgment with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. So, brethren, remember the ABCs: affection, benevolence, and charity. Learn to inculcate that. Get beyond the agapeho. Get beyond the niceties. Yes, we should be that. That goes without saying because that's part of agape. Agapeho is part of agape. It's a derivative of agape. They all come in that respect. So we should be civil, we should be mannerly, we should be mutually respectful toward one another. But ultimately, we cross the threshold into affection and benevolence. Why? So that we can be more willing to give to one another for the overall success, not only of ourselves, but for the church community that we are a part of. So remember, ABC.